Okay, this is a video to show you how to replace the wheel bearings, and I mean, if you're in there, do the rotor too, or if you're doing the rotors, this is what you got to do on a 91 through 94 Mercury Capri. These have the captured rotor design. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you've discovered that you can't just remove the wheel and replace the rotor. It is bolted in behind the hub, so it has to be pressed apart. And it has some tricky bearings with a spacer in there that you need to pay attention to when you're putting it all back together. So we're going to press this apart, real simple, and I'll show how it all goes together. So this is our setup, supporting the knuckle here, a little pin through the ball joint hole supported, and that looks sketchy, but that's enough. It doesn't take a whole lot of pressure to press these apart. The hub with the inner race has been pressed out, and there's a seal in there that's come out with it. But the important thing is there's a spacer that goes in here. When I pressed it apart, it remained in the hub here, and you can see it just there. I'll grab it. Ooh, it's sticky. Okay, that's the spacer. Okay, so that goes in between the two inner races and determines the preload on the bearings. That's the tricky part of this. So do not lose this. Do not swap it with the other side. Don't throw it away. You need that. If you don't have that, your bearings won't last 10 miles. So we're over here at the vise, and we see the glory that is the captured rotor design. I've loosened them up. The 4 bolts come off. I'll hand these off. Here we go. And a little tap. We'll get the rotor loose, and the rotor comes off. And there you are. That's how that all works. I'm sorry that Ford did this, but that's what we have to deal with. So I have a basic bearing splitter and a steering wheel / hub puller on here, and so while we're at it, worth mentioning is the hub itself here. This top piece, what will happen is if the bearings are bad and have been bad for a long time, right where my thumbnail is, you see a little bit of mark there. This one's okay, but if your bearing's been bad for a long time, this will be eaten up here, and you'll be able to feel that with your fingernail or take a measurement, and it will be smaller than it is down here. If that is the case, you either need to replace this or get it repaired. Alright, so we have the knuckle in the vise. These 2 inner races here, I'm going to gently drive those out with a punch. We're going to get the outer races for the inner and outer bearing pressed in. The outer race for both the inner and outer bearing are pressed into place. So we're going to go over the vise, and I'll show how to set up the preload tool. So this is the Ford spacer selection tool. You could come up with something. Somebody like reproduces this. I think the Festiva guys do. And you can also get spacers there. So this is the spacers that came out of this side. It is a, can't read it on the phone. It is a number 11. But this basically simulates the axle, the stub, and you're supposed to put this in with the races and torque it down with no grease, and you torque it down in a couple steps, tightening it, and then spinning it, tightening it, spinning it. Total, you want 145 foot-pounds, and we'll take care of that and show you what we got. Alright, the tool is installed. The spacer is installed in between the races, and we have a inch-pound torque wrench with an adapter to get us to the size that we need, and the preload is measured by checking focus. There we go. So it's reading it's hard to tell here. About 8 inch-pounds or so, maybe a little higher, 8 to 9. And you can see it's got a fair amount of resistance to it. I can spin it by hand. It's a little tough though. So that is the factory spec between 2 and 10.44 inch-pounds. Again, this is reusing the spacer that came with this hub. It's totally fine. You can probably reuse the spacers. If you don't have these tools, for the most part, just put the spacer that came in it back in and you should be okay. All sorts of fun packing the grease into the bearings. Looks like a friggin' murder scene. So we're going to get the bearings packed. We got the seals ready to go. There's an inner and outer. They are different. The inner races, once they're packed, have to go in with this spacer, and then the seals get pressed in over top. We'll show you that in a moment. Okay, the inner race is in. The seal's ready to go in. I have a seal driver here, and we're gonna get that seated. Alright, critical part here. The spacer is going back in. We're gonna get that roughly centered up in here. Okay, very good. The outer inner race now goes in gently. Beautiful. And we're going to get the outer seal pressed in, and we'll see when that's done. Alright, new rotor's in, and because it's just fantastic, they bolt in. 33 to 40 foot-pounds on these bolts. Very good. This is an important part of this setup for the last step. The rotor is bolted to the hub. The hub is sitting on a bearing driver. So we're going to now press the knuckle onto the hub. Alright, I have located the correct tool. So this bears on the inner part of the race here, and that's what we want to push down on, and that will seat everything down onto the hub nicely. So again, overview of the setup. We're about ready to go push everything in. So here it is, all put back together. We're spinning nice. New seals are in place. Let's see if I can get a... Yep, brand new seals, and it is good to go. So that's how to do the wheel bearings, and if you're doing rotors, unfortunately, you're probably also doing bearings. So there you go. If you have any questions, you can, I guess, put them in the comments or whatever. This is the Rocket Man. I've been into these cars for a while, just trying to put a resource out for people to, do this. It's not a complicated process, but there's a little bit of nuance to it. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed.